Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation has been the focus of a lot of this cash for access, that's what it's being dubbed, conversation. But what does the foundation really do, and how involved is the Trudeau family? Well, we're going to bring in the CBC's David Cochrane. You've been following this story for the National all week. Appreciate this. So let's explain to people what exactly is. It's called the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation.
Right, and this was founded in 2001. It was intended to be a living memorial to the former Prime Minister. It got its big infusion of cash in 2002, Hannah. That's when the House of Commons voted to give it an endowment of $125 million. And that is the primary source of funds for its operations, interest off that and its investments, though it does take private donations, which is why we've been talking about it this week. So what it does each year is it funds about up to 15 doctoral scholarships for students, 15 of those a year, 5 research fellowships. It also finances a network of mentors to help these scholars advance their work, and it pays for things like public events and lectures. Now, it's all very sort of political science-y in a lot of ways. They focus on 4 areas. They call themselves an independent, nonpartisan or a charity, and their work focuses on 4 areas: human rights and dignity, responsible citizenship, Canada's role in the world, and people and their natural environment. So it really does have this academic social sciences focus. In terms of thinking about foundations, this is more like a Rhodes Scholarship than the Clinton Foundation in terms of how it functions and operates.
So we heard earlier in the week the Prime Minister attended this this fundraising event in May at the home of the Toronto home of a Chinese businessman, and then the Chinese businessman donated $200,000 to the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation.
Yeah, it was a different businessman than the person who owned the home.
Right.
So yes, this is the controversy, right? Because private fundraising dinner, we saw the picture of the dumplings and the Labatt 50, right? This is that he was having with Chinese Canadian businessmen, but also some businessmen from China, one of whom was an advisor to the Chinese government. So this happens in May. The donation is announced June 1st. It's $1 million, $700,000 to the University of Montreal, $200,000 to the foundation, and another $50,000 to the university to build a statue of Pierre Elliott Trudeau. So there's this linkage that has been made of May dinner, June announcement. Come on, what's going on here? Well, we talked to the Trudeau Foundation, and the work on this predates that dinner by quite some time. I mean, you don't just do a $1 million donation in a matter of days. So what happened is that in January of 2014, the Chinese, more than 2 years ago, the Chinese businessman reached out to the University of Montreal saying, we want to do something to honor Pierre Elliott Trudeau. In September, they looped the foundation in. They had their first meeting in September of 2014, and then they had 18 months of negotiations to figure out how it would work, what it would pay for, how the money would flow, and just how this whole thing would be developed. And the announcement was made in June. So while the May dinner and the June announcement, it looks really fishy in a political sense, if you back it up, these talks were going on right from January of 2014, and it was the University of Montreal that this started with, not the Trudeau Family Foundation.
And just quickly, the Prime Minister attachment to the foundation? Right.
So he said when he was asked about this the other day, I have not been in any way associated formally or informally with the foundation in many, many years. Many, many really stands out there. Not quite true. He was involved with the foundation from 2002 to 2014. It was December of 2014 that he formally withdrew from active involvement in the foundation. Their records show his last participation in a board of directors meeting, of which he was a part, was in March of that year. So it's been 2 years since he was involved with it. Not I don't know if that's many, many years, but the Prime Minister's office told us today that all of his involvement with this was run through the Ethics Commissioner, and they got a green light.
David Cochrane, thanks for the background on this
one. You got it. Thanks.
When will the Liberals admit that they have broken their own guidelines, that they are doing the wrong thing?
Selling access to government ministers to secure cash for the Liberal Party is the definition of a breach of trust.
We respect all of the fundraising rules at all times.
Okay, so lots of questions over Liberal Party fundraisers. The opposition saying Justin Trudeau selling access, and we heard the story from David a minute ago. The government says it hasn't broken any of the rules, but have the Liberals broken their own fundraising guidelines? Joining me now from Toronto, former Liberal Party President Alf Apps. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Apps. We know the Liberals haven't broken Election Canada's fundraising rules, but how can the party justify breaking those guidelines that the PM set out for his government?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure that it's clear that they've broken the guidelines. And I think it is, we've been going through an evolution in Canada of transparency and openness in terms of how we fund our political parties. It's been going on going back to the major reforms that were introduced by Jean Chrétien. And this is a process. The Liberal Party of Canada has done nothing in violation of the law. And the Liberal Party of Canada, I think, has actually accomplished a huge amount in terms of opening up the process to ordinary Canadians.
Okay, so Mr. Epps, nothing in the law, we've agreed to that. And you just said you don't know if they broke any guidelines. So let's just remind viewers the open and accountable government guidelines, and these were what the Prime Minister released when the government took office. Take a look. There should be no preferential access to government or appearance of preferential access accorded to individuals or organizations because they have made financial contributions to political and political parties. A $200 donation to a foundation bearing the Prime Minister, $200,000 bearing the Prime Minister's dad's name, including a $50,000 statue, does that not give the appearance of preferential access?
I don't know how you could even suggest that. It's completely independent of the Liberal Party of Canada. And the process here, and believe me, I've been the chairman of hospital foundations. The process of major donations is one that doesn't happen in the blink of an eye. We have an interesting coincidence here where someone who had been talking to the University of Montreal about a donation for a very long period of time ends up showing up at a fundraiser in Toronto. The issue really here is, does government business get discussed at these events? And the answer in my experience is no. But that being said, this is a process where we're evolving. The Liberal Party of Canada has already opened it up so that we have 44,000 ordinary Canadians every month, or some number like that, that are now given to the party instead of what happened 20 years ago, where you had the Royal Bank of Canada giving $150,000 and this and that and the other. And the federal law today, most of which was introduced under Mr. Chrétien, the Liberal Party, is, as far as Western democracies are concerned, including many of the provincial jurisdictions in Canada, the most progressive, transparent system of political fundraising in the world.
So if the Prime Minister and his government want to follow these guidelines, then why did they vote against a Conservative motion to bring them under the authority of the Ethics Commissioner?
Well, first of all, political parties include a lot of people who are volunteers. People like me who've never earned a cent from their involvement in politics. Those people should not be subject to public policy ethics considerations. That is it's inappropriate to take a public sector, public office holder, ethics commissioner to suddenly be overseeing a whole bunch of ordinary Canadian political volunteers and what their activities are on behalf of the party. Elections Canada and the general regulatory regime for political fundraising has proven, I think, to be quite effective in terms of how ensuring that the rules are followed. And no one in this case, let's be clear, no one is saying rules weren't followed in this case. We've got a Prime Minister who
We're
has
talking
been
about the Prime Minister's ethical guidelines that he sent out. Like, forget about the rules that are out there. They're strong, they're strict. We're talking about the ethical guidelines that the Prime Minister put out there. Doesn't that give the appearance that these ministers and he himself are maybe breaking those?
I actually think they're only breaking them if you assume that there are discussions occurring between lobbyists or private interests at these events with officials.
Then what is getting discussed at these events with big, Chinese wealthy politicians? What's getting discussed there? What gets discussed?
I think all sorts of things could be discussed there, including the state of the economy generally, what sort of should be happening in terms of relationships generally between Canada and China. I have no idea what people are discussing, but the one thing that I can assure you of, and I've actually checked into this myself today, is the Liberal Party is aggressively checking attendees at fundraising lists, and wherever they can, when there's somebody who's actually got an issue in front of the government where they've got a personal interest at stake, they have, as an individual citizen, voluntarily decided they want to attend a fundraiser, they're actually asked not to attend. So you know, we can.
Is this new that they're going through these lists now because they're really trying to avoid this appearance?
This is part of open and accountable government and making sure that the appearance, and let's be clear, there is not a single suggestion that any donor at any of these events has received any preference in terms of the public policy of Canada. There's no allegation to that effect. What people are saying is that the University of Montreal got money, that the Trudeau Foundation got money, in circumstances where somebody showed up moments before on a discussion about a donation that had been going on for well over a year. So I think what's happened here is that, you know, people are looking for a soft underbelly because they think, you know, that the Liberal Party of Canada, as it is taking the high road. But the reality is, the modernization, the creation, compared to, let's just take the United States of America and what the rules are there for political fundraising. We are so far ahead of them in terms of how progressive, how open we are.
Now, is there anything that you can see that you would say, I would change this just to make it a smidge better?
Actually, I've not only seen it, I've done it. When I was president of the party, we ended the thing that you had to pay a membership fee to be a member of the Liberal Party. We actually took it from being, you know, a small number of donors to over, you know, 100,000 donors who were actually giving $5 and $10 and $15, you know, a month, sort of thing. And that's the future of political fundraising. Are we going through a transition period now where we still do these events where people pay $500 or $1,000 or $1,500?
$1,500, yeah.
Yeah, we definitely are. But I think we're headed to a new era, and the trick is to make sure that Canadian taxpayers don't end up funding the business of political parties more than they already are, which means political parties, like the Liberal Party has done, have to move to broad-based democratic fundraising, which will actually permanently end the appearance that someone is actually able to change the policy of the Government of Canada by paying money.
Al Phapps, I want to thank you for your time today and help us understand this fundraising issue.
Thank you.
Well, the issue of terrorism and climate change are on the table at the Francophonie